Look at the pictures. Can you please guess what are tools to collect data based on the picture only? So let's come to the objectives of today's lesson. So after this lesson, I hope that you can understand the definitions of sample and population, identify different sampling methods in choosing samples. You also need to choose a suitable data collection instrument or tools. And last one, you will learn how to design a data collection tools such as observations and interview. I divide the lesson into two parts. The first one is sample. The second one is data collection tools. So for the sample, we will learn the definitions of population and sample, and also we learn 4 or even 6 sampling methods. Now let's start with the practice number 1. For practice number 1, I want you to decide the statement whether it's true or false. Now let's come to the definitions of population. So population is the groups of individuals having one characteristic that distinguishes them from the other group. For example, the university student or the grade 1 student. However, sample is a group of participants in a study selected from a target population from which the researcher can generalize to the target population. Generalize here means khái quát hóa. So for example, you can see the pictures here. So we might have a population made of high school teachers, individuals who all teach in high school or school counselors, individual who occupies counselor position in all level of educational school. So that's made of the population called teachers and educator in one school. So how about sample? Sample is some teachers or some individual that are picked from that population. For example, a population are high school teacher, individual who all teach in high school or school counselors, or individuals who occupy a counselor position in all level of educational school in Vietnam. So this one we call them as Vietnamese teachers and school staff. However, the sample can only be 100 teachers and school staff selected from maybe 5 random public high school teachers and school staff, and it made up for 500 teachers. And so you can see that the numbers of population are always bigger than a sample. So how about the scales of sample? How large should be? So first, actually there's no clear-cut answer for this one. So the correct sample size must be based on the purpose of the study and the natures of the population. However, remember that the larger the sample, the better data you can collect. Why? Because it can actually help you to have greater reliability, and it can also help you to enable more sophisticated data to be used. How about sampling methods? So in here, I divide sampling method into two main types. The first one is random sampling methods. The second is non-sampling methods. So for random sampling methods, there are three: simple random sampling, stratified and random sampling, and systematic random sampling. Also, for non-random sampling method, there are also three, which are convenience sampling, purposive sampling, and snowball sampling. Now let's come to the definitions of random sampling methods. So a random sampling methods are any methods of sampling that utilize some forms of random selection. It means that all subjects or all participants have the equal chances of being chosen to be samples. The researcher should use the sample to show that the data are high validity, and it also can be at a very low risk of research bias, like sampling bias or selection bias. Now let's come to the first type of random sampling. So simple random sampling methods actually best represent the characteristic of the larger population. However, there are something that you need to remember when you use this method. The first one, you need to have a complete list of every member of the population. And then you can contact and assess each member of the population if they are selected. And remember, you need to make sure that you have enough time and resources to collect data from the necessary sample size. So I give you one example. So normally, the researcher will print out the list of 12 clients or 12 participants, and they put their name into a separate bowl from 1 to 12. And you mix them up, and then you close your eyes and pull out the first three. So that's we call simple sampling method. How about stratified random sampling? So stratified random sampling is a method of selecting a sample in which researchers first divide the population into smaller subgroups, or we call structure, and based on the shared characteristics of the members, and then they can choose randomly among each group to form the final sample. So these share the characteristic that can include, for example, same gender, same age, same sex, same race, same educational level, or the same income. So this method can ensure that the specific characteristics are proportionally represented in the sample. So you can see in the example here, for example, when studying polling for election, population demographics or life expectancies are very important, for example. But then when you can actually look at them, divide them into different groups in terms of their incomes or the incomes for different jobs across the nation. So this one, the best way for you to generalize the population in terms of characteristic. Next one is systematic random sampling. So this sampling method involves making a list of potential samples. Then you choose a random point to select the subject in the sample frame. So it can be biased if the list has been arranged in a particular manner. So for example, in here you can see there are 10 people. And in this case, every second person in the systematically selected. So you can see in here, the person number 2, number 4, number 6, number 8, and number 10 have been systematically randomly chosen. Let's move on to the next type, which are non-random sampling methods. So non-random sampling methods are any methods of sampling that do not involve any form of random selection. So it means that all subjects or all participants do not have the equal chances of being chosen to be samples. When you use these kinds of methods, be aware because it demonstrates low validity and you can be at a higher risk for research bias such as sampling bias or selection bias. Now let's come to the first one, convenience sampling. Convenience sampling is a technique in which subjects are selected because of their convenient accessibility or proximity to the researchers. For example, the researchers can recruit friends to participate in their research or collect data from the nearby location or send the survey in a mall or share the link on the social media. Moving on to the next one, which is purposive sampling. So in purposive sampling, we sample with a purpose in our mind. We usually would have one or more specific predefined groups we are seeking. So the research relies on their judgment to choose the members who will taking part in the study. So for example, the researchers select participants who are experts in a particular field or subject matters. The last one is snowball sampling. So snowball sampling method refers to a kind of techniques in which existing subjects provide referrals to recruit samples required for the research study. So I will give you an example. So I'm a researcher and I know you. I invite you to come to my research. And you have a lot of friends and you also invite other friends to join you. And your friends can also actually invite other friends to join. So that's we call snowball. Next one, let's come to the data collection tools. In today's unit, I will introduce you 2 collection tools. 1, interview. 2, questionnaires. So what is interview? So interviews is a form on which the researcher records the answers supplied by the participants in the study. The researchers ask questions from an interview guide, listen for the answers, or observe the behaviors of the participant. They later need to record responses on the survey. Now let's come to the advantages and the disadvantages of interview. So one major advantage of interview is its adaptability. So a skillful interviewer can follow ideas, can actually come up with responses, and investigate motives or feelings of the participant, which actually the questionnaires cannot do. The ways in which a response is made, for example, the tones of the voice, the facial expression, the hesitation, or so on, can provide information that a written response cannot conceal. Questionnaires responses may have been taken at the face value, but a response in an interview can be developed and clarified. How about there are some problems with the interview? Interviews are very time consuming. So in a 100-hour project, you will be able to interview only a relatively small number of people. So it is a highly subjective technique. So therefore, there is always a danger of bias if you used interview. Analyze responses can also a problems, and also wording the questions is also very, very important in interview. So, however, we cannot deny the advantages of interview, which interview can bring you a lot of rich material and can also put a lot of ideas for the questions with a lot of responses. Let's see about the categories of interview. Based on the format, we have 3 types: individual interview, focus group interview, or telephone interview. For the content, we have 3 types, which are structured interview, semi-structured interview, and unstructured interview. Now, let's base on the format. There are 3 types, as I said before. The first one is individual interview, which means that you need to conduct on one-on-one interview, individual to individual. Focus group interview, which can save you some time, which means that there are one interviewer with a group of interviewees. It can be 4 to 5 interviewees in one room. And the last one is telephone interview. Of course, it is a type of one-on-one interview, however, you used phone. Let's come to the 3 types of interview based on the content. First one is structured interview, which is actually the same as questionnaire. In here, you don't need to improvise. You don't need to make up questions. You just need to base on the list of the questions that you prepare at home. The advantages of this type of interview is it is very easy for you to compare the data, and it's also very easy for you to repeat using the list again. However, it can only provide you limited answer. Sometimes it can make you misrepresent the truth, and it's also inflexible. Opposite to structured interview, we got unstructured interview, which is the same as conversations. In here, you need to improvise a lot, which means that you need to make up questions based on the answer of the participant. The advantages of this is it is extremely flexible, and you can actually gain in-depth information. However, it is a lot of biased, very time-consuming, and even expensive. It is so hard for you to repeat all the questions that you asked in the unstructured interview, and it's also very hard for you to analyze data, especially when you want to compare data. So we got one perfect things in the middle, which we call semi-structured interview. So for semi-structured interview, you can have a checklist. You also need to improvise, but not a lot as the conversation. The good one of this is actually it is combined the best thing in the 2 types. However, to conduct a semi-structured interview, you need to have a very, very good skill in interview. It is also very time-consuming to collect data and analyze data, and you need to have a pre-survey for questions, which means a pilot survey for all the questions in the interview list. Now, let's see what should you do before the interview. According to Haler et al., in 1996, you need to have the recording device first, and also the time. You also need to fill in the interview profile sheets of each participant to make sure who they are. So during the interview, there are some notes for you. First, when you ask questions, make sure that you wait for the answer. There's one tip for you. You can count slowly to 10 before deciding to intervene in some way. You can actually keep controls of the interview using some method. You can show that you agree when you say or you say that's interesting. Or you can actually repeat the questions or ask for more explanation if you want. You can also even return to the previous question and ask for further explanation, or sometimes you can actually change the topic. You do not show any disagreement, do not show the agreement or suggesting the answer to the participant. So you can see here, it's a sample of interview checklist, what you need to do. Now let's move on to questionnaires, a very popular type of data collection tool. Questionnaires are forms used in a survey design that participants in the study complete and return to the researcher. Participants mark the answer to the questions and supply basic personal demographic information about themselves. Questionnaires are always used by a lot of researchers in different fields, including social science, marketing, or healthcare. Now let's come to some advantages of questionnaires. The first thing you need to bear in mind is efficiency. So questionnaires are a very cost-effective and effective way to collect data from a large number of respondents. They can be administered to a large sample simultaneously, saving time and resources compared to individual interview. Second, it is standardization. So the questionnaires allow for standardized data collection. So every respondent receives the same set of questions, minimizing the interviewer bias and ensuring the consistencies in the data collection. Next one, anonymity. So respondents can answer the question privately, which can lead to more honest responses, especially for sensitive topics. This anonymity can be important for topics like sexual behavior, substance abuse, or political opinion. Next one, you can actually approach a large sample size. Because questionnaires can distribute widely, the researchers can gather data from a diverse and representative sample. It can also increase the external validities of the study. However, what are the disadvantages? First, you need to think about the depth of the data. Questionnaires typically provide limited opportunities for the respondent to elaborate their answer or provide the context for their answer. They may not capture the full richness of human feeling or reactions. Second, lack of clarification. So in questionnaires, respondents cannot seek clarification on unclear questions as they can in the interview. They cannot ask the interviewer. So it can lead to misinterpretations or incomplete responses. Next one is low response rate. Actually, many people may ignore or refuse to complete questionnaires, resulting in low response rate, which can introduce sampling bias or reduce the general liabilities of the findings. The last one is design challenge. So creating an effective questionnaire requires careful design to ensure questions are clear, unbiased. So poorly designed questionnaires can lead to invalid or unreliable data. So here I will show you some type of questions. First one is open-ended questions, which ask the participant to write a short answer, and you can see some example here. The next one is closed-ended questions. The first one is multiple choice, with or without the other options, include yes or no questions. For example, you can see that in here we got do you have a 6.5 or higher IELTS score? So in here, the participant can answer yes or no. Next one is rating scales, which actually based on Likert scale. So Likert scale is made up of 5 to 6 scale. For example, you can ask the participant to rate the experience about using Google Translation, and they can actually choose whether they are very unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied, or very satisfied. The last one is rank ordering, which you ask them to rank the importance of different options. For example, in here, the question is, please rank below factors in order of most important to the list when choosing a job. So we got here 4 criteria: environment, salary, promotion, and personal development. Next one is a very special type, which is demographic questions. In here, you can ask some more private information for the participant. For example, you can ask them about the gender, the age, the educational background, the position in the gardens, and also working experience. So the question is how to write a good questions. First, you should start with the clear objectives. You also need to keep the question clear, concise, and avoid ambiguity. You should use simple language. It is not a vocabulary test, so do not test your participant. Also, try to stay unbiased with using neutral language. For example, do not use "don't you agree that the new policy is effective?" You should say, what is your opinion of the new policy's effectiveness? Next one, avoid two-aspect questions. For example, do not ask 2 things in one question. Do you like the products and its price? You should break it into 2 different questions. Do you like the products? The other one, do you like its price? And the last one, remember to revise and refine the questions. Now, let's come to another practice. Practice number 2. I want you to identify the problems of each question and can you improve it? Here's the answer. So the first question, how regularly are you a user of your school's book borrowing service? So you know what is school's book borrowing service stand for? It's actually library. So please use library. Next one is the next questions. The problem here is avoid ambiguity. So for example, do you go to one-on-one consultation with your thesis supervisor often? So ambiguity here is the word often. So how often is it? So you need to specify that it is within the last month. Next one, ask one question at a time. Because the question here say, do you use the school library? And if so, what do you think of its facility? So you should break into 2 different questions. So that is pretty much about everything of the unit. What did we learn so far? The first one, we actually look at sample, the definition of population and sample, and the sampling method. Next one is data collection tools. Today, we look at 2 tools. First one is interview, the second one is questionnaires. Thank you so much for attending the lesson and see you again in the next lesson.